Welcome. Thank you for choosing our channel. Help us out by subscribing, liking the video, and leaving a short comment. We greatly appreciate it. Make yourselves comfortable. The story is about to begin. The glowing red numbers on Elara Vance's laptop screen were a death sentence by spreadsheet. Each figure in the column labeled medical expenses was another nail in her financial coffin. A final notice from her sister Maya's care facility sat unanswered in her inbox, a ticking time bomb of shame and desperation. As an art historian for a struggling museum, she lived her life, yet she couldn't afford the one thing that was truly priceless: her sister's health. The irony was a bitter pill she swallowed every single day. She was staring at the abyss, wondering what was left. Her suit appeared. He was not a museum person. He was too sharp, too clean, his presence sucking the scholarly dust from the air. "Ms. Elara Vance?" he asked, his voice smooth and sterile. "I am Marcus Thorne, legal counsel for Sterling Industries. I have a proposal for you." Before she could process the name of the global tech empire, Thorne was inside, placing a thick leather folio on her desk. "As of this morning, Sterling Industries has acquired this museum. Your position, however, has been singled out for a unique opportunity." He spoke with the chilling efficiency of a man who billed by the minute. "My client, Mr. Alistair Sterling, is aware of your work in artifact authentication. He has a private collection. He wishes to hire you to catalog it." He flipped the folio open to the contract's signature page. The salary listed was an impossible figure, a number with so many zeros it looked like a typo. It was enough money to solve every problem she had and every problem she could ever imagine. Hope, fierce and dangerous, flared in her chest. "The terms are non-negotiable," the lawyer continued, his tone leaving no room for argument. "A 5-year commitment. You will reside on site. A strict all your needs will be met, and your sister's entire medical debt will be settled upon signing." It wasn't a job offer. It was a gilded cage presented as a lifeline. A deal with a devil she had never met. The reclusive, phantom-like Alistair Sterling didn't just want her expertise. He wanted to own her time, her world, her secrets. But the image of Maya's pale, smiling face flashed in her mind. For Maya, she would walk into any cage, any fire, quiet, defeated whisper. There was no other choice to make. The next evening, a silent obsidian black car transported her to a world she didn't know existed. Sterling Tower was a needle of glass and steel piercing the clouds, and in lurching silence that felt like falling upwards. The doors opened directly into the penthouse, a cavernous space of minimalist luxury that seemed to float above the glittering expanse of the city lights below. It was breathtakingly beautiful and achingly lonely. A monument to a man who owned the world but seemed to have no place in it. He was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, a tall, lean silhouette against the night. He turned. Alistair Sterling was a man of sharp, aristocratic beauty and an unnerving, absolute stillness. His eyes, a startling cobalt blue, were ancient, holding an intelligence and weariness that seemed utterly at odds with his youthful appearance. "Ms. Vance," he said. His voice was a low, melodic baritone that wrapped around her like velvet. "Welcome." He glided toward her, his movements unnervingly silent on the polished marble floor. He took her hand, his skin cool and smooth as stone. "I am delighted you accepted." His thumb brushed the pulse point on her wrist, a fleeting, proprietary gesture. For a split second she saw his nostrils flare, an animalistic tick that vanished as quickly as it came. He smelled not of cologne, but of something clean and old, like cold night air and stone. He was not just a man. He was something else, something older. He gestured, lay open, waiting. "If you would be soaked her ribs." Every instinct screamed at her to flee, but the thought of Maya's future held her captive more surely than any lock and key. This was trembling hand. Elara Vance reached for the pen, the weight of her signature feeling less like an agreement and more like the selling of her soul. She was a historian, but she had the distinct feeling she had just become an artifact, acquired by the world's most dangerous collector. The days that followed blurred into a strange, hermetically sealed reality. The vault was Elara's entire world, a treasure trove that surpassed her wildest academic dreams. She handled a Viking sunstone that hummed with a phantom energy and translated the private diary of a Medici prince whose confessions it was a scholar's paradise. But the paradise had a warden, and he was a creature of shadow and silence, opulent penthouse like a ghost. Elara learned to feel a subtle drop in temperature, a sudden stillness in the air. He would appear only at night, a dark silhouette against the glittering city, his intense cobalt eyes watching her work. His knowledge was as impossible as his collection. He'd casually comment on the forging techniques of a 10th century blade, or the specific pigment used in a Renaissance fresco as if recalling a recent memory, not a historical fact. His focus on her, he would find reasons to be near, his gaze lingering on the pulse in her throat. She never saw him eat. The state-of-the-art kitchen remained untouched, a sterile showroom. Her meals arrived, but he never partook. She rationalized his behavior as the eccentricities of a reclusive genius, but a primal fear prickled beneath her skin. She was an artifact he was studying, and his interest felt ancient, predatory, and deeply personal. The vault became accessible on her digital floor plan. The atmosphere within was different, heavier, charged with intimacy and secrets. This was not a collection of history. It was a collection of a life. His life. It was here, tucked away in a dusty, forgotten alcove behind a heavy tapestry, that she found the painting. It was not on any inventory, an object meant to be hidden. It was a portrait from the 18th century, Rococo, all light and life and soft-edged beauty. The artist was a master, capturing the subject with a breathtaking vitality. It depicted a young woman in a pale blue gown, leaning against a sundial in a sun-dappled garden. Elara's breath hitched, her blood running cold. Recognized the authenticity instantly. The craquelure of the aged paint, the hand-stretched linen canvas, the period-correct pigments. But the woman in her recognized the face. It was her own. Every detail was perfect, an impossible mirror across 2.5 centuries. The defiant tilt of her chin, the slight curl of her lip, the exact hazel shade of her eyes. And there, a single perfect brushstroke above the right eye, was the tiny crescent-shaped scar she'd gotten from a childhood fall. The world tilted on its axis. This was not a forgery. It was real. The vertigo was so intense she braced herself against the wall. The job, the salary, the insistence on hiring her, it was all a lie. A cruel, elaborate ruse. She was not the historian hired to study the collection. She was the prize exhibit. A storm of cold fury surged through her, eclipsing the fear. He had played with her life, her family's desperation, all to acquire her for his bizarre, private museum. She would not be his specimen. She would not be his ghost. She spun around, her hands clenched, ready to unleash a torrent of accusations, ready to shatter the gilded silence of her cage. He was standing in the doorway of the alcove, a pillar of shadow against the gallery's soft light. He hadn't followed her. He had been waiting. His ancient cobalt blue eyes weren't filled with triumph or satisfaction. They were fixed on her, and in their depths swirled a profound, soul-shattering melancholy, an expression of grief so old he had known she would find it. This was not the end of his game. It was the beginning. "Who is she?" Elara's voice cut through the heavy silence, sharp and brittle. She jabbed a finger toward the portrait, toward her own impossible face from a bygone century. "And who am I in this twisted fantasy of yours? Her replacement? A ghost you decided to buy?" Alistair's sorrowful expression didn't waver. He stepped fully into the alcove, his presence dominating the small space. "Her name was Isabel," he said, his voice a low thrum of ancient pain. "And you are not her replacement. You are an echo. A soul that has, it would seem, returned to the world in the same form." Elara let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "An echo? You expect me to believe in reincarnation? I expect you to believe your own eyes," he countered, his voice dangerously soft. "You are a historian, Elara. You know that painting is authentic. You work for a man who has not aged in 300 years. In a world with creatures like me, Is the persistence of a soul truly the most unbelievable air between them, unspoken but deafening? Vampire. The truth settled over her not with a scream, but with a cold, terrifying clarity. His stillness, his nocturnal habits, his impossible knowledge. It was the only explanation that fit the horrifying puzzle. "So you've been watching me," she whispered, the anger giving way to a profound chill. "Hunting me. Tracking you," he corrected, a flicker of shame in his ancient eyes. "For decades. A face in a crowd, a name in a registry. When I found you so close and learned of your circumstances, I saw an opportunity near me again. It was a desperate act by a very lonely man. I used my wealth to leverage your desperation. I will not apologize for it because it brought you here, but I will not defend it as honorable." He had admitted it. The clinical, cruel manipulation. He had bought her, plain and simple. But as she looked at him, she saw no triumphant collector, no gloating captor. She saw a being drowning in an eternity of solitude, who had reached for a phantom and grasped a real, breathing woman. "I thought," Alistair continued, his voice barely a whisper, "that I could purchase a memory, that I could surround myself with a ghost. But from the moment you walked through my door, I knew how wrong I was. You are not her." His gaze met hers, intense and raw. "You do not have her gentleness. You have a fire, a defiant spirit that even you do not." Thought I had caged a ghost, but I soon realized I had trapped a phoenix. The confession hung between them, a raw and unexpected offering. He wasn't trying to own her. He was admitting he couldn't. He had set out to buy a priceless treasure, only to discover it was alive, with a heart and a will and a fire all its own. In that moment, the gilded bars of her cage seemed to melt away. He had all the power, but she had the one thing he truly wanted, something his fortune was useless to obtain. Her fear did not vanish, but it was joined by a new, electrifying sensation: power. Slowly, deliberately, Elara closed the space between them. She stopped just before him, tilted her chin up, and met his immortal gaze with her own mortal, unyielding fire. He expected her to run, to scream, to break. He did not expect her to step into the heart of the danger. She raised a hand and laid her palm flat against the cool, hard plane of his chest. There was no heartbeat beneath her touch, only a profound stillness. "You're right," she said, her voice steady and clear, a quiet declaration of war and surrender all in one. "I am not Isabel." She held his astonished gaze, a new unspoken contract forming in the space between them. "The question is, what are we going to do about it? The most precious treasures, a person's heart, their trust, their defiant spirit, carry no price tag. They cannot be bought or owned. True connection is born not from trying to possess a ghost of the past, but from having the courage to earn the heart of the person standing right in front of you." Thank you for listening. If you were, please show your support by liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment below. Your engagement helps us create more tales for you. We'll see you in the next story.